Welcome to this panel discussion. New York style cabaret, Chicago style cabaret. And parmi nos Français, si vous avez des questions, parce que c'est un peu différent entre nous et Paris, l'expérience que nous avons eue ici, c'est une évolution un peu différente. Donc, si vous voulez poser des questions, parler de faire des comparaisons, par exemple. Mais en tout cas, ça c'est une discussion pour nous sur l'histoire du cabaret aux États-Unis, je dirais.
Well, I want to just say that, you know, I came sort of last minute to both these projects, but I was overwhelmed at how much information there was. You know, your thing on New York Cabaret, which can be translated into Chicago Cabaret too, but then the research project that you two did on Chicago nightlife. It was, you know, I'm not a native Chicagoan, so it was really instructional for me to know what sort of came before my career in Chicago. So thank you.
That was the short version.
That was the short version. Well, in fact, June, could you tell us, you know, like, how did you go about doing some of the research on the nightlife in the South Side, and yeah.
Well, there are many books, well not many, there are several important books on Chicago nightlife, especially Bronzeville on the South Side. But part of also my own research was personal. I used to write a nightlife column for the Chicago Tribune for about 3 years, and that helped with the research, and my memory of just participating and being part of being an observer of the nightlife, not being part of it, but being an observer of the Chicago nightlife. But also articles in the Chicago Tribune and other newspapers, interviewing cabaret singers. I also wrote a book on cabaret about the musical and the movie, but I included a chapter on modern cabaret, and part of that research was reflected in the book, and in the presentation tonight. And of course, Charles came up with these great images that match my text. Can't say enough about that.
I apologize.
Hold on.
My mind was somewhere else.
Debbie, grab this.
Okay. So I apologize. My mind was somewhere else when you were talking about the Redhead, which is one of my favorite places. So I missed when it opened, and she died in 2017?
Yes, last year.
Very recent?
Yes,
What happened?
just last year. I'm not sure the exact cause of death. You can always Google that and find out very quickly, but I just wanted to include that piano bar because it is one of my favorite places. And you know, it's still there, and you walk, and you can't not see that great neon sign with that great redhead, you know, image. And what I described in there was what I heard that particular night from, what did I say, from ABBA to Johnny Cash to Billy Joel. That was what I heard within 1 hour on a particular night, I think maybe a summer or so ago. But that just captured the essence of piano bars, because you never know what you're going to hear.
I was a redhead when I discovered it.
Yeah, I think what happened last year was her red hair turned gray.
D'autres commentaires? Other questions? I have a question, actually, which has to do with the relationship between piano bar and cabaret. Is there a difference? What's the functional difference between them? And in France, I don't know if there are those categories that would be the same. So I'm going to start with Bob, because he's the piano bar pianist.
Oh, I've categorized me. Actually, you're kind of right, although most of the places I worked were not piano bars per se, as much as they were piano lounges. And I spent a number of years in the Rush Street area in Chicago during the 70s, which was sort of the end of the whole scene. But one of the things that came out here was the fact that the New York Cabaret was heavily structured as far as form, as far as this kind of thing and that kind of thing, which is more what has progressed in Chicago at this point. But I recall that many of the people that I worked with, including myself on Rush Street, sometimes I worked with myself, sometimes I worked against myself. But I worked from a spontaneous point. Every night I walked in and I opened with the same number, and I did piano bar. That was basically piano bar at Punchinello's. That was my longest at one place. And I walked in and I had the same opening number and the same second number because I got a feeling of where the room was going and I got a feeling of what was happening with me. But from there on out, I did something by what was I reminded of from the song I was doing or what was going on in the room that I could handle and maybe have gain a little bit of control over if necessary. And what song would I do? And I would very often follow one song after another on a spontaneous basis, in other words, you know, and which was not quite a cabaret thing, but it wasn't also a piano bar because Punchinello's, for instance, was not really a piano bar. It was an entertainment center set up as a piano bar, and anybody. It was also not an open mic bar except by choice. I had control over that. I could invite somebody up if I wanted to, or if I didn't want to, I didn't have to. But the thing that, what you're talking about, Chicago Cabaret, I tended to work, I didn't know what I was going to do next until I got into the song and I said, okay, that's what's happening here, and where can I go next? The lady who opened the Redhead was very much of a devotee of Sage's restaurants. And she came after having spent a lot of time in the restaurants of Gene Sage, and they also coincidentally had entertainers who worked this way. Denise Tomasello was a perfect example. Denise would work spontaneous. She would work the entertainment and the songs according to how she felt the room and how the room seemed to be, which was a kind of an art that we developed, and it's not the same as it used to be. But that was one of the aspects of Chicago Cabaret, which made it, to my mind, a cabaret, because it was still a type of communication between what was going on. It was just not a story necessarily, unless we were very lucky to have it turn out to be a beginning, middle, and whatever end. Anyway, that's enough.
Well, you know, I want to say that one of the first things I saw in Chicago when I moved here many years ago was you with Denise Tomasello at not Sage's, but the other Eugene's. Yes, okay. But another place that I remember seeing you played for George Gershwin's niece, Alexa Gershwin. And so she had a set list, right?
Yeah, she had
a set list, okay. Well, could you mention to some of the people, some of the other artists that you had worked with? Did you ever work with Hildegard?
I worked with Hildegard.
Okay, you got to talk about that.
Hildegard I worked with, and as a matter of fact, I worked with her for about 4 weeks at a place called the Ivanhoe, which was at Wellington and Clark Street. And unfortunately, the week after we closed, it burned down. We didn't really call it. Hildegard was a fascinating lady to work with because she would get up on the stage and she would talk to the audience and say, I tell you these things, or I sing these songs in order to inform you of something. And I tell you things when I'm talking because you need to know these things. And I sing you songs because you need to know what's happening in these songs. And she was a very interesting lady to work with and enjoyable. I had a good time with her.
Well, I was just going to say that I know she was of German extraction, I think. And,
Milwaukee, yeah.
And does anyone know My Cousin from Milwaukee by George Gershwin? It's a very comedic number that is written in honor of Hildegard.
And Darling, je vous aime beaucoup.
Yeah, this was Senko.
That was Hildegard.
Yes, well, I'd like to compliment Rogers here. One thing, in the movie, in the documentary film on the Torchbearers, Steve Ross is featured, so is Bobby Short, and both actually define or defined, Bobby Short, as themselves as not as cabaret performers, but as lounge performers, and which means not exactly the same function as a piano bar at all, in fact, but the function of audience interaction with the audience as much as possible, delivering a message for each song in turn. Yes, following the feel you get from the room, which is not a structured act. It is an act that follows the reaction of the audience. So it is cabaret in that sense. It is cabaret in the French sense of the word too, I guess. It is the most general sort of cabaret, meaning interaction with the audience, taking into account a conversation. So it's a conversation going on with the room. A piano bar is something different, in which you're basically producing music that is going to help sell booze. That's the thing. So I was getting to the economic function of the piano bar. Don't Tell Mamas, for instance, there is the piano bar and you have the cabaret rooms, and they function together. In front of the DTM, the Don't Tell Mama, you have a restaurant that is called, an Oyster Palace. Anyway, it's a restaurant, same owners, Asian guys, and you have the cabaret room and the larger restaurant. And one cannot function with the other, and especially you cannot have cabaret acts that make money for you. You need to sell booze or to sell food. It's what we call in France the limonadier. That is, you cannot function and sell art. It doesn't work.
I'm fascinated by the black and tan. That's okay, I got a big voice. I'm fascinated by the black and tan bars. And it seems to me that the laws of the political laws and the legal laws were sort of suspended in that space. That's amazing. Why can't we have that in all of life? Wouldn't it be wonderful?
Well, I think the black and tans took place at a particular time in Chicago history, and can we ever go back to that history? Only time will tell. But it was something special, and it's especially popular, as I mentioned, on the south side, especially Bronzeville, which is not terribly far away from Hyde Park, as many of you know.
Yes. Well, hello everybody. So, about the piano bar, may I say something? There is a little bit difference. I agree with what has been said earlier. The piano bar, you can play a piece of music to remind people sitting there something. You don't have to continue it sometimes, You don't play it in the same way, it's kind of entertainment, and it depends also on the atmosphere around you. You react with what's happening around you, so it changes sometimes. You don't need to, sometimes, okay, it happens. You don't need to go till the end of the piece, you can just go from a piece of music to another, okay?
Segue.
Segue, yeah. Okay.
Create medleys.
Yes, kind of medleys, yes, sure. For the cabaret, I think it is a show, so you study the piece that you're going to play, because you play it in a certain time. Chronometré, I don't know how do you say this in... chronometré? Time. It is timed, you say. So you play this piece in a certain time, and then afterwards you play another one, how... the order, okay? L'ordre of songs, okay? So it's more show, it's not entertainment. Even if there is kind of proximity, yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Intimacy.
Intimacy, okay. Between people, so, yeah. But it's a show, you study what you're going to do, you bring it to the audience, and you've got audience that is there to listen to you, to see what you're going to present, to give, The piano bar, you go to piano bar, and you go to have a drink and listen to something, okay? so you don't really pay attention to what is really
Exactly.
like.
At the same time, in Manhattan, it can be very different at times. At Don't Tell Mamas again, but in many other places, you have show-loving people who are there at the piano bars, not only to entertain themselves by having a drink and listening to music, but actually to perform. So many times you have the pianist starting a tune and the whole room singing along.
Okay.
Which makes it, it's all entertainment. The song goes, that's entertainment, okay?
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing. So it's entertaining a crowd in various ways, and a piano bar pianist has to have this connection to the room also.
That's what we have seen earlier in the film, yeah. That the piano has something to do. He has a work, yeah. I agree with that. Yes. So he plays something, but he knows the atmosphere and he gives an energy. That's his role also. Yes. And in the cabaret, it's a little bit different. Yeah. So thank you.
You know, one of my favorite places when I'm in New York is Monday nights at Birdland. I don't know if you've gone there or, because I remember one night Celeste Holm was sitting there in the audience, and you might get, Marilyn May sitting in, or, some Billy Stritch is sometimes the pianist. And so, I don't know if that's more of it's not really a cabaret because you don't know who's going to show up. It's more of an open mic.
Well, it's equivalent to Paterino's.
Yes, yeah.
Marie's Crisis in the Village.
Oh, now do you want to talk about Paterino's or Marie's Crisis?
Yeah, I was going to say in New York, in Greenwich Village, there's the tiny little place that used to belong it's where Thomas Paine lived at one point, many during the Revolutionary War. But it's a piano bar, and quite often people from Broadway stars just stop by after a show and pop in and sing a song. But
Well, since Elizabeth brought up Birdland, I thought I should mention Paterino's, which is Chicago's version of what Jim Caruso started at Birdland, I guess, in 2003. And this is not...
He moved places a lot.
But now he's situated, is he not?
I don't know where he is now.
Birdland.
Okay.
But in any case, the Chicago version of it has been in one place all this time, and it's 11 years. It's starting in its 11th year. Paterino's, which is emceed by Denise McGowan Tracy, and her partner in crime is Becky Menzie, and they have a remarkable thing going as well.
And we're inviting everybody. You mentioned that they're...
And everybody is invited. Tomorrow night is Monday night, and that means Paterino's, and that means come on over. It's a remarkable, reasonable deal. You can get a 3-course dinner for $19.95, and the main course is so big, I'll tell you, you need a box to take it home and have it the next night. So it's a remarkable thing, and of course the talent is unexpected, but always a wonderful, wonderful evening. And we're going to have lots of cabaret people there. Oh, okay, Claudia, you finish the pitch.
Well, the pitch is that it's sold out. So if you don't already have your reservation, you're not going to be able to go. So we reserved for 40 people involved in the Cabaret Connexion. And if you're not going, you should let us know, because we have a waiting list of people who want to go. That's a very important thing. Si vous n'allez pas demain chez Paterino, dis-moi, parce que il y a des autres gens qui attendent. So, a couple more. You wanted to speak to the black and tan question?
Yes, I did, Claudia. Just a little by way, I'm a Chicago transplant. Moved from the greater New York area, just about half hour outside New York City. So cabaret entertainment has been part of my life, all my life, although I've been to very few of those bars. But I'm also a retired magician and professional clown too, just to let you know. So for me, entertainment has been a great racial equalizer to a limitation. Understand that these black and tan clubs, as great as they were, in my opinion, they also helped to serve continuation of segregation. Because these were socially acceptable places where people could mingle and then go back to their separate lives. So I've always felt that it was a wonderful thing that they were part of it, and unfortunately it kind of helped maintain the situation. With that being said, I look forward to participating in things with cabaret because to me this is a way of expression. Entertainment has always been a way for people to mix, mingle, and entertain. So with the gentleman saying, I wish it could be all the way, we'll see how society goes. We'll find out how that goes. But on the other hand, I love the sentiment because essentially this is why we're all here. At least I hope this is why we're all here, to share and learn and participate.
How many of you folks here know the song Miss Otis Regrets? I mention it only because I wanted to share with you one of my favorite moments working in Chicago. I was working at a place called Toulouse on the Park, which was run by Bob Shangari, who was, by the way, one of the best club owners as far as entertainment concerned. He had 3-4 pigs running at the same time. He had entertainment every day in all of his places from the day he opened to the day he closed them. But the one I loved, the day I loved the most, was I was working Toulouse on the Park, and I started to do Miss Otis Regrets. And somebody else started singing it, and there were about 30 people there. We had a sing-along of Miss Otis Regrets. Because you mentioned sing-alongs, the spontaneous sing-alongs of Miss Otis. I sat there and said, I don't believe this is happening.
You can hear Bob Moreen sing Miss Otis Regrets on an album called Paris and the Jazz Age. This is a little pitch. We do have some CDs for some of our participants. I know that Clotilde has her XXY soundtrack. So as you're leaving, if you want to give her a donation for her CD, and Paris and the Jazz Age is in my little blue bag, and Bob Moreen was my principal on the album singing a fabulous rendition, a serious rendition of a song that began as a joke.
Yeah.
It began as a joke because somebody dared Cole Porter to write a song to this phrase, Miss Otis regrets she's unable to lunch today. But it's also a song that Bricktop was given by Cole Porter. And she was the first to sing it. We'll take one last thing and then we have to close.
James, is your book in English?
No, I'm afraid it isn't.
Oh,
I'm afraid it is. This is one reason I didn't want to write it. Because it cannot sell.
Shall we find a translator for this book on New York Style?
Check your website.
Perhaps we should be finding a good help Jacques to translate it. He could probably do it. And then we'll have to just find a good publisher. And June knows something about these publishers. Maybe Applause Books will take it up. So one last comment from Cappy Kidd.
Okay, this has been an incredibly rich discussion, and I'm glad we got it on video. Yes.